Brett McKay here, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Manliness podcast. The personal uniform is a look that you settled on as your regular get-up. Today on the show, I talked to two style writers, David Coggins and Michael Williams, about all things concerning this stylish yet bandwidth-saving approach to dressing. We discuss what a personal uniform is, how to develop one, and why that development comes with age, and how to find inspiration for yours. We also talk about establishing the base pieces of your personal uniform, buying multiples of its fundamental components, and refining your look over time. After the show's over, check out our show notes at aom.is/personal uniform. David Coggins, Michael Williams, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brad. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, David, longtime listeners are likely familiar with you and your background because this is your fourth time on the podcast. This is a rare, you're a four-peater. This is a rarefied group you've joined. But for newer listeners, can you briefly tell us about your background in the world of menswear and style? And why have you spent so many years writing about it?
Yeah, I don't like to do the math on these things and look back at how long I've been writing about this stuff. But it's great to be back on the show. Great to talk to you. I started out because I was just interested in clothes and why we like them and how they're made and the people who make them and people who wear them in an interesting way. And as I get older, my views evolve the same way the way we dress evolves over time. And also half the magazines I wrote for have gone out of business the way print magazines tend to do these days. So as a matter of fact, I even wrote a lot of my early style stories for Continuous Lean, a site Michael knows a lot about. So that was a good starting point for me. And it's nice to be talking with you guys today.
Yeah, Michael, let's introduce you to our listeners. What's your background in the world of men's clothing and menswear?
Yeah, so I started a website called A Continuous Lean back when websites like that were called blogs. No, I started a men's style blog. I was like randomly one of the first people to do that. And it's even kind of funny because if you meet me, you'd kind of think like, wow, this is the guy that started the men's style blog. I maybe wouldn't have guessed that, but it's all in here. It's in here somewhere. But I basically was interested in all these things, was, reading about menswear online and a lot of like what was out in the magazines, not what Coggins was doing per se, but just what was out in general kind of wasn't exactly the aesthetic or the point of view that I was looking for. And I thought, well, I should just do this for fun as a creative outlet, and started that site. And it became this, I sort of was in the right place at the right time with the right point of view. And it sort of just kind of became this popular thing. And then that has sort of propelled me along to, just my career has sort of followed, the growth of ACL. And then, I do marketing work and write about other stuff on, my whole career has sort of evolved around that. But I sort of just fell into it. But I'm still very interested in, much of what Coggins was saying too. It's like the people that make these things, or how things are made, or what goes into the things we wear every day. And that's something I'm still pretty passionate about.
Yeah, Continuous Lean, I remember stumbling upon that back in 2008 or 9. And I'm sure if a guy's listening to this podcast and they own a pair of Wolverine 1,000 mile boots or a pair of selvage jeans from that North Carolina mill, they probably have you to thank.
Yeah, that stuff was coming sort of mainstream when I was championing it. So I don't know if they have me to thank, but I definitely helped sort of propel that, for better or worse. And yeah, the denim factory, which is no longer, is called the White Oak Factory. But yeah, that stuff, I think part of my idea behind doing what I was doing with ACL was this stuff isn't going to be around forever. And especially if people don't start to appreciate some of these things. And a lot of the stuff sort of has come and gone, but then other things have gained incredible popularity. So it's kind of been interesting to see on both sides.
So you guys, a while back ago, David, you did a newsletter on your Substack about finding your personal uniform. And this is something you and Michael talk about on your podcast that you have. It's a recurring topic. Let's start out there. Like, what do you guys mean by a personal uniform? Is this something that you're supposed to wear every day, like Steve Jobs and his black turtleneck and jeans and New Balance shoes?
Well, I think the uniform is fascinating to me because it combines sort of self-expression and ease. And that's a lot of what we're talking about when we're talking about how to dress. It's something that reflects who you are, but also something that makes your life easier, especially in the morning when you don't want to make major decisions about how to present yourself to people you work with or people you're meeting with. And so I'm fascinated with, especially as we get older, it seems like we arrive more clearly at a sense of kind of who we are and the clothes we need to reflect what we're doing in the world. And so a uniform, I think for some people, it might intimidate them because it seems like you're committing to something, but I find it really liberating in a way because it just takes another thing out of you've resolved something very important and easy on a daily basis. So I think that's what we talk about when we talk about uniforms.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason Steve Jobs was doing it is maybe a little bit different than why David and I champion it. I think he was like trying to just eliminate the effort in, choosing what to wear every day. And it's almost like if you could not eat and just have Soylent if you just needed the nutrition, right? And you can like get rid of eating as a time, as something that you spend time doing or energy on thinking about, and just, get the nutrition from something else. You could do that, but it wouldn't really be much fun. And I think that a lot of times, like I think about Steve Jobs, and I think he was doing it maybe for a little bit of a different reason.
Yeah, I think you guys aren't approaching the personal uniform as a chance to not care about aesthetics or how you look. And it's not like a Star Trek thing where everyone's wearing the same uniform because of its functionality. But you guys do care about aesthetics and you do care about how you look. And, you've dialed into your own unique aesthetic and what you think looks good on you and what looks best on you. And then you replicate it. So you're not just being utilitarian about it, but I mean, it does save bandwidth in figuring out how to dress. Beyond that, are there other benefits to having a personal uniform?
Well, I mean, dressing to me still reflects some sort of self-knowledge. So if I see someone has arrived at a uniform, I know that he knows himself, which is always going to be appealing and reassuring. And also that he's at ease with himself. It communicates something that puts other people at ease. And so we're not talking about a uniform in some way that like all men wearing the gray flannel suit. It's like someone can wear a gray flannel suit and look like himself. Someone can wear a chore jacket and khakis and look like himself. But you kind of you do have to make decisions to arrive at the point of not making decisions, right? It's sort of like if you master a meal that you can cook when you have company, it took you a long time to arrive at that. But now that your friends are coming over, you know exactly what to do and how to prepare it.
I guess I need to be clear here. Like when you're talking about a uniform, I think a lot of guys would say, well, I've got a uniform. I wear t-shirt and jeans and flip-flops every day. It seems like that's not what you guys are talking about. It's like not like a default. You're trying to be intentional about it. Am I right about that?
I mean, I'd encourage anyone to avoid something that involves other people seeing their toes. I don't think that's going to win any awards unless you're a lifeguard. But I think that we're talking about something that you're like, go out in the world. And it's not because you ran out of ideas. It's because you have a really good idea. And then that's specific to you. I mean, maybe uniform is even, I don't know if it's giving the right connotation, but when I see, and I know when you meet certain people, like a certain creative director, you're like, oh, I get it. This is what he does. He's got like a very specific t-shirt, a very specific pair of sneakers, maybe a fancy watch, and like jeans that I don't know what they are, but I know they probably cost a lot. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I was like, that guy has arrived at that point of view and and he's at ease in it and it works for him almost every day. And that, that communicates even a certain sort of power in a way, or at least resolve that he knows what makes sense for him.
I think it's interesting. Everyone can have a different opinion about this, and there's no right or wrong. And the way Coggins sees this could be very different than the way I see it, and it still could work. So there's no right or wrong answer with this stuff. I see the uniform as like a refinement of your personal style. Say you took your music collection that you've accumulated your whole life, and you had to strip it down to like the top 25 records or whatever, and you're kind of like, all right, this is the stuff I enjoy the most and I want to sort of like continue to have in rotation. So for me, it's like if I feel like, oh, I look good in unstructured sport coats and they're casual enough for me and they're comfortable enough and they work for meetings and they work for travel and they work for all this other stuff and I feel confident in them, then I'm going to keep that in my my sort of rotation or make that part of my uniform. And so everything I wear is kind of like has that sort of basis where, you look good and you feel confident in it, and it feels like you are representing yourself. And so your uniform is made up of all the things that you've sort of tried over the years and feel like you look good in and give you confidence and present you in a way that you feel is accurate to how you see yourself. And that to me is the uniform. That's, it's a evolutionary process in a way. Like, I don't think you could do it if you're very young. You can't just be like, all right, this is my uniform, because you kind of haven't tried everything. You need to know, sort of go through that process and figure out what works best for you and what makes you feel the best. And it's sort of like stripping away all the noise and just keeping the important things that serve you sort of the best or make you feel the best.
Yeah, David, I follow you on Instagram, and my parasocial relationship that I have with you, I sense like every time I see pictures of you, there's a continuity of what you wear. It doesn't matter if you are fly fishing or at a book signing or with Michael watching the PGA Tour. It's kind of weird because all those situations they call for varying degrees of formality. And you do change the formality, but there's an overall that's David's uniform. How would you guys describe your respective personal uniforms these days?
Well, I should say I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, more than most people should ever do. If you're writing about it, stories and books and newsletters, you're going to be spending too much time. And also, if you're slightly tend to be self-absorbed, which maybe someone had said about me at one point in my life, or more than one person, then you have some sense of who you are and how you want to communicate yourself. And I think I generally like traditional tailoring, but then loosened up slightly. And I think there's a way to be comfortable. I like things that are old, that I've had for a while. I don't like to look like I'm just wearing new clothes. And I don't generally think people look their best in new clothes because it's just a little squeaky. And that, I would say that about things in general. And so to me, if you have an easygoing sport coat that you've had for a while, and like an Oxford shirt, that not a dress shirt, just an Oxford collar shirt and a knit tie, that will get you looking pretty good in most places, at least. And I feel comfortable in those clothes, and I can kind of ratchet it up slightly into more kind of flannel and a suit if I'm going somewhere that I think requires that. And if I'm in the countryside, I can kind of loosen that up with chinos and something like a short coat or something. And that kind of makes sense for me. And I still feel relaxed in those situations. And I think, I'll just put a word in for tailored clothing. I think a lot of guys try to wear a suit or a sport coat, and it often doesn't fit well, and they get, which isn't even their fault. They just get it from a place that doesn't specialize in those things, or doesn't have a person who helps them get to a point where they feel more comfortable. Most people get a suit, it doesn't feel good, then they reject it and they never feel comfortable in it, or they don't ever want to wear it. But if you get one that does fit well and that you are comfortable in, and you just literally wear it 4 or 5 times, you get to a point where you're like, oh, I can do this. I can be myself in this, and then kind of evolve from there. So I will put a quick word in for tailoring there, because I think so many men look good in it, and they often don't get to the point where it would be like driving a manual transmission car and you stall once and you're like, forget this, I'm sticking with an automatic.
Yeah, I think I have a similar view to David, but I think my approach, I think, was formed a little differently than his was. So part of what I have always strived to do is, like, I always thought about, if I look back, if I took a photo of myself now and what I'm wearing, and I looked back at it in 10 years or 15 years, how am I going to feel about that? Right. And what I'm wearing, is it going to be relevant to that time in 15 years, or am I going to look like a clown? And, I think so. Part of what I've been always trying to do with my personal style is think about that, trying to be sort of neutral in a way, but still representative of my personality. The other thing I've tried to do, which I think Coggins does really well, and I think, if you talk about the two of us going to the Masters together and what we were wearing versus what everyone else was wearing, I really try not to give into the sort of social pressure of wearing a certain thing in a certain place. And I really try to stay with who I am and what my personal style is, and not feel like I need to go into some other zone because I'm going to an event or because something's happening. I really try to keep it focused on, what I feel comfortable in, what I feel like represents me, and, try to stay in that zone in a way and not sort of give in to the social pressure of, dressing a certain way, which I think there's actually a lot of in the world. There's like a lot of pressure to look a certain way. And I think, I'm always just trying to look like myself. And that's kind of my goal. And those two things together have sort of, driven me into this place where, wow, I, have a pretty defined uniform, which I feel great about.
So like, okay, the Masters example, all right, most people there, is there like a dress code at the Masters?
I mean,
or is it just like you wear Nike golf clothes? Is that what it is?
It's
Most
a very
people
funny
wear,
situation because it looks like these guys think they're going to get handed a emergency golf situation and they're going to have to run onto the course and hit it on the par 3.
I was thinking about this. I was at a golf tournament this weekend. I think people also don't know what to wear there because of it's, Augusta National and whatever. And so I think they just think, well, it'll be really safe if I just wear golf clothes. And so a lot of people wearing golf clothes, I think is just based on that. But then there's also just people wearing golf clothes, which doesn't make any sense. And then there were Coggins and I, and we were not fitting into like anyone else, but it was, I think we perfectly looked like ourselves.
So what do you guys wear? Like, would you be easy to spot?
I think we would be. I mean, I've been reminded of this photos that were taken of us. So, I mean, just the age of social media, people send this picture to me and ask what coat I was wearing or I had a Masters hat for one thing. They have a rope hat, different one every year. And so that's always what we look for together, at least what I look for. And I was wearing, I think, some sort of sunglasses and just a chore coat, but I was wearing a knit tie. And so I don't know, it had a particular look to it. And I thought it looked like we were having fun. I mean, I love the Masters, but I'm not really a golf person. I'm just a Masters person, if such a thing exists. And so we were out there enjoying ourselves. And that photo, I mean, I guess we did stand out, but that's only if you care about these types of rarefied exercises anyway.
Michael, what were you wearing?
I was wearing khakis and an Oxford button down, like I was just wearing something really simple, which I wear most days, I was like very much in the zone of what I typically wear. I think we would have stood out a little bit, but I also don't think like anyone walking by us would be like, what are those guys wearing? I think if you really stopped and said like, who's different here, it would have been, we might have stood out in that way, but I don't think like we were sort of raising any eyebrows, like walking around the place,
Yeah, I know the picture you're talking about. And you're right. Like you guys didn't look like weirdos. Like you actually look, David was wearing a tie. Like he looks comfortable. Like that looks appropriate for the Masters with the ball cap. And then, Michael is like, yeah, he looks well put. He looks put together and he looks comfortable as well. And you didn't look like you were wearing that weird synthetic golf stuff that every attorney dad wears these days. So David, your general, when I describe your uniform is like, I think country gentleman. That's what I see. Yeah, he just looks relaxed, doesn't look overtly, you look comfortable. It looks well worn and comfortable. Would that be a good description? Like you're ready, like it looks like you're ready to go out for a fly fish.
I think
at any moment.
I mean, it's funny when you start to put words on these things, because then it sounds like, I think one of the points of what we're talking about is trying to be relaxed. And when we like dial it in what the recipe is, then it sounds more contrived, but that's what we're doing. So I would like to think that it's like maybe a country person who comes into the city, right? So you've got a little bit of a foot in both worlds. So you can handle having kind of a serious lunch, or you could handle like going outside and, looking at birds or something, or fly fishing, like you mentioned. And so I think you want to have I always like people who are interested in kind of two different worlds. Like I like English guys who love Italian tailoring because they try to dress like Italians, but they end up just looking more English. But I love that. And Italian guys who love the traditions of being English. These Italians revere the English traditions. And when they try to dress like them, I mean, they can't look English. They're just going to look more Italian, which I love that. So I'm into all of those worlds kind of coming together and with a certain amount of ease. I mean, I used to like things that were fancier maybe, or I thought I had to get really serious dress shirts or really serious tailored clothing, especially when I worked more in Midtown. But it's too hard to keep that stuff up for me. I don't want to get all that stuff laundered and pressed. And so I found, or even if I'm traveling, it doesn't travel so well. So I like fabrics that can kind of absorb heavy wear. And I like to have, nice enough things, but I like to wear them and live in them. And if elbows start to get a little thin, that's fine with me.
All right. So Michael, how would you describe yours uniform? David's like country mouse goes to the city. What would be yours?
I don't know that I have a setting. I really love well-made classic American things. Like I a lot of times wear jeans and a Oxford cloth button down and a navy merino sweater, and that's kind of like my zone. I have a couple jackets that I figured out that I love. Like I'll wear a barber coat, or I'll wear a chore coat, or I'll wear unstructured sport coat, but I'm not as tailored maybe as David, but I do love these sort of tried and true classic things, the Shetland sweater and, leather brogues and things like that. So that's kind of my zone. Canvas sneakers. I have like one canvas sneaker I'll wear and one pair of leather shoes that I wear and one pair of boots and, one type of jeans and one khaki. And so I just kind of have figured out like all those classic items. And I like really well-made things. So I like to think about value in a different way where you maybe spend a little bit more up front and buy something of better quality that'll last you a long time. And like David, I love to wear my things a lot. So, I love to wear things over and over and really, spend time with them and live in them. And that's to me very comforting.
So you guys are in your 40s, and you mentioned earlier, this is like a uniform isn't something you can really establish in your 20s. So how did you kind of decide, like, I've arrived? This is it. This is the look I'm going to have until I'm buried in the ground.
Well, it evolves, and I think one thing that's interesting when you look at this is that you can tell different times in your life and different things you're trying to do. So when I really had to, when I was working in advertising and was in Midtown a lot, I had to get up and get dressed for serious people. I was looking for making the fewest decisions, but with the rough core of what I was trying to do. So for me, that was like gray flannel trousers, a blue shirt, a light blue shirt, and a solid tie or a knit tie. And then the only decision I had to make was what sport coat I wanted, what pattern sport coat. So that pattern was a kind of variable, and everything else was set. And I really started to think a lot about it at that time. I was probably in my mid 30s then. And then as I evolved, that was a little more tailored than I wanted to be. I like to not worry so much about taking care of the clothes. I just want to be able to toss them in the wash. I don't even want to iron them. I just want them. So then I got into more like corduroys and moleskin trousers and Oxford cloth shirts, like Michael was saying. And that started to make sense. Sometimes you don't realize it until you've worn it for a while. I mean, I talk a lot about how much we can learn about our clothing and dressing when we travel because we have a limited number of things. And so sometimes that sets you off towards a uniform because you just have one sport coat or a couple pairs of whatever it is. And you start to wear them on most days, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is something I can do this. You get back to New York or wherever you live, and you're like, oh, I just want to stick with this. This is very reassuring. I don't want all the clothes that are sitting in my closet. I want to just stick with what I had. And that can be a good way to know how little you need or to learn about what suits you.
We're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. And now back to the show. Here's a question. Something that I've noticed in the past, I wouldn't say like 5 years, like my second half of my 30s, I'm in 40s. One thing I've noticed personally is I'm starting to pick up stuff that part of my dad's uniform that I remember. I'll pick it like, this looks good. And I'll put it on. I look like my dad when he was my age. Because my dad had a uniform. His uniform, he was a federal game warden. So he had to go to the office. It was pretty casual. It was like Wrangler bootcut jeans with a pair of cowboy boots and a peak polo shirt from Land's End with this like awesome looking belt. And it just looks solid. Like I got pictures like that's it's a solid look. And sometimes every now and then I'll pick up a polo shirt like, this looks awesome. Then I look at it. Oh, this is why I think it looks awesome. My dad had a shirt just like this. I'm curious, did your dads have personal uniforms, and do you think they've influenced your own personal uniform?
Coggins, I think you can. I'm not like very influenced by what my father wore, although he definitely wore very much the same thing all the time. But my dad was like in a very different sort of line of work and career, and basically owned a construction company. And so for me, it was a very different thing than what my life and whatever now. So I don't feel like I'm gravitating that direction, but I think a lot of these things, because I never learned any of it from my father, I feel like a lot of it's just like inherent in people, right? You're sort of, you just like have it or you don't in a way. But Coggins, I'll throw that to you. I'm sure you have a good
Well, I mean, it's funny. My dad is very stylish and a great dresser, but he's much more adventuresome than I am. Often it's the other way around, where the child is more adventuresome. But he loves color and pattern, and he'll wear all sorts of things that are way too bold for me. And he kind of gives me a hard time. He thinks I'm too conservative. He thinks I'm overdressed, which again is not the way these things generally are. And I think I like the fact, though, that as a young man, as a boy, really, he took me to the Polo store in Minneapolis where I grew up, and there was a man who worked there, a guy named Paul, and they taught me things and put me into clothes that I didn't know if I was ready for. And I have this old herringbone sport coat that was union made in America. Thing is like crazy now if you see it, huge shoulder pads, and I didn't like it as a kid, and now I see it. I actually had a friend take the shoulder pads out, and I'm still wearing it now 35 years later. And I think it's good to learn. I mean, what I learned from my dad is a lot of lessons, and the importance of knowing lessons, even if ultimately you react against those kind of guardrails. And I think now we don't take the time to learn. Sometimes we don't take the time to learn those lessons and to know what we're reacting against. I feel like it's sort of a free for all out there, and it helps to kind of know the history of some of these things. And often we do, like you're saying, Brett, come back to stuff our fathers did, or something you see, or you're like, oh, right, I like this from that movie or that era. Maybe it's time to look at this more clearly. And then, you go on eBay for a few hours and you try to get to the bottom of it.
It is interesting. Like, and we're saying, you theoretically you can't have a uniform if you're young, but it's like anything else. Like it is possible. And a lot of times, and especially if you look at, the people that I know that grew up in Italy and the culture of dressing in Italy, and fathers and sons, and the way that education happens between fathers and sons, it can, really shape someone's personal style to the point of like they are very young and they know exactly what they like, and they have sort of a lot of perspective. And, that's a big cultural thing that happens in Italy. So it can happen, and it can happen here in America. It can happen anywhere. Someone could figure it out very young and just be like, this is what I'm going to wear. And they have it. So, I think it's anything is possible. There's no perfect path to any of this stuff or right or wrong way to do it.
No, and I think something too I've noticed as I've gotten older. So when I was younger, I was more willing to take risks with things. I'd buy something like that looks cool and it was flashy or whatever. But now I'm not drawn to that. I'm not about like blending in, but like I don't want to like stand out too much. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course. I mean, that's
a
huge, there's a time in your life when you experiment more, when you try to discover more things, which is really exciting. I mean, I think about, if you live in New York and you go to a lot of concerts and clubs, and you try movies that you don't, haven't given a lot of thought to because maybe there was a good review, but you didn't even think much about it. And now it's like, wait a minute, if I'm doing something, I'm researching what I do. Am I going to commit to watching this TV show or to buying this thing and that's just part of, I think, how we invite new things into our lives. We just have so much already there that you're not going to start reading a biography on someone that's going to take you 3 weeks unless you really are ready for it.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I went through the neo swing movement thing, and I was like, I just had like gabardine, camp shirts and like bowling shirts, and I had I got these things. They were hideous. Well, I thought they were pretty cool at the time. It was a pair of black and white wingtip Doc Martens, but like the white part was black and white check. And I thought it looked awesome. I think I wore them to a prom.
Well, I mean, the classic situation is when someone looks like they've got it all figured out and they're like 17 and they're walking out, and you can tell they feel like they're the coolest person, in the zip code. And you're just like, wait till you see the photos of this in 5 years or 10.
Yeah. Wait, can I just say that I was looking at, I found some profile on TikTok, and this kid, he talks a lot about fashion. He's got like a fairly significant amount of followers, and his videos get a lot of likes. And he, I was kind of interested as, someone that feels fairly well versed in the stuff he's covering, what he was saying. And he, he's confident in what he's talking about. And again, he's like got a good following. And then there's one thing where he does a tour of my room, and I think it's like his dorm room. And it's, in a way, like it's cute and like it's cool that he's doing it, but also like it's very much like a college kid's room. And, he's like trying really hard to like have this, sensibility and personal style and, with furniture and all this stuff and design. And, I can't help but to sort of think it's, amusing in a way because he's so young, he doesn't really know, but he's speaking with so much conviction and he feels so strongly about what he's saying in the world. And it's not a judgment on anyone. It's, that's, I feel like part of youth is you do feel very confident in the things you're doing. And then when you look back at them, you're like, wow, money, money, boss tones. Like, I don't know if that was the aesthetic that I should have been going for.
No, I like that, Michael. I like that heuristic you use in trying to figure out your uniform. Is like, if I look at a picture of this 10, 20 years from now, what's my reaction going to be? Going to be like, yeah, it looks good. Or I'm going to be like, oh man, that's embarrassing. And I think my choices when I was in high school, I'm like, that was dumb. But I mean, it made sense at the time.
But so that's the famous thing though. But as soon as you're explaining to a young person, you have to be like, actually, it wasn't just me. Everybody was doing this. Or then you're in trouble, right? Because then it's like you're swept up in something and you couldn't pull yourself outside of it or see yourself outside of it. Where you're like, no, that's just the lapel width at the time, or this band was huge, or you should have seen Michael Caine. Everyone was doing it. And that's usually, but it's human, and I think that's what's so great about these conversations. I mean, I always love when someone gets really obsessed with something, because even if I remember my friend telling me earnestly in high school, he's like, I only listen to Pearl Jam. That's the only thing I listen to. Of course, that lasted for like 6 months, but that's what it means to be 16. You have these strong feelings, and it doesn't stop there, by the way, because, guys are saving all their money to buy some watch or car or whatever else it is, or sneakers that then they either just sit in their, closet or they kind of resell them.
So, okay, let's talk about how you guys can establish their own personal uniform. It sounds like it's an organic evolutionary process, but like, where do you start? Say you want to be a little more intentional about this. Like, all right, you're 35, 40, you want to establish your look. Where would you guys recommend starting?
Well, I mean, these are big questions. I love certain stores and certain types of clothes. And I think it's important that you have kind of a few basic things that look good on most men. And I think Michael alluded to like the unstructured sport coat. And I think that's really a good place to start. And I think every man looks good. And, it can be washed cotton. It can be a little more, it can be tweed. It can be whatever you like. But I think an unstructured sport coat is something you can wear with dress trousers, something you can wear with chinos, something you can wear with jeans. And so I would look for that. And you can go to Drake's, you can go to J. Crew, you can go to Ralph Lauren, but you can, or just start the process and see one that you like and start looking on eBay for cheaper ones if you want. But I think that's a really good place to start, because that's something that can, kind of be part of your arsenal in a really useful way. And I think people will like how it looks on you. I mean, there's a reason these clothes men have been wearing them for 100 years. Like, it works. It's effective. It's like, why does the martini exist? Like, it's a good equation. These things make sense way before we've been around, and I hope way after we're around. And so, get a good sport coat.
All right, so start off with the sport coat is your recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. But one that you can, when I say unstructured, I mean like not a lot of padding in the shoulders and in the chest. And so that means like you can even sometimes roll it up. If you're in the South, look at Sid Mashburn's site. These guys live for that sort of thing. Not just the formal suiting, but an actual sport coat, I think, is really, really something that can go with you wherever you go.
Michael, how about you? Like, where would be your starting point?
Well, I just want to say David's starting point is like personal uniform 301. And I would start at 101. I think the sport coat's like maybe advanced lesson, a couple courses down the line. But, I think the Sid Mashburn reference is a great one. There are places that you can go to. There's a lot of great men's stores left in the United States that you can go into and talk to them about what you feel comfortable in and what you like. And they can help guide you. Like, it's pretty difficult to go to astray at Sid Mashburn. They're going to help you. My personal recommendation is like, there's a lot of things out in the world that have been fundamentally the same for a long time or very consistent over a long period of time, like the barber coat, like the 501, like certain, certain brands, like my favorite shoe company is Crockett and Jones. The shoes have sort of never changed. And to me, that's like a good bet. Like, it's like, find those companies and wear those things that are pretty classic. It's hard to mess that up in a way. The other thing is, I think you want to think about when you feel the best and what if it's like figure the mental images of yourself where you looked the best, or what were the scenarios where you felt like you looked really good, and try to build on that and replicate that and expand that. I think that's a good place to start.
I think that's a good idea. So you're not trying to play dress up when you're trying to establish a uniform. You don't want to feel like you're going to prom or you're going to a black tie wedding.
I think it's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
You want to feel like you are yourself, you know?
One thing that's a really good point that Michael makes about enduring design that have been mostly unchanged. And if you're feeling less kind of formal than a sport coat, I think of the chore jacket is really a useful thing. Almost every company makes a good one now, and that's something that you can wear most days. And you can even dress that up or down. I mean, I wore it with a knit tie to the Masters, but I think most of the people are not going to do that. But that's a really nice everyday piece, if we're speaking in like, you know, style terms, that you can get a lot of use out of, and that will go a lot of places. And I think you also want to, when you're thinking about the uniform, you're thinking about something that's repeatable. So that's like the old Brooks Brothers Oxford cloth shirt, and you buy a stack of them. But you're also thinking about an investment that Michael alluded to earlier that you have for a long time. So if you get a pair of Crockett & Jones Chelsea boots, like that's an incredible thing. It's a fair amount of money. And then you have them for a decade, and that's great, or Alden's or whatever it is. And so you kind of want to pick your spots about something like a Lacoste shirt. That's great. Like get a stack of them, or if they go on sale or whatever. And then you're also getting, you know, like the jeans you really love. I feel like when you get something that you talk yourself out of, or you save a little money, then it just ends up unused, and you really want to believe in what you're wearing and care about it. And then you're going to wear it more.
Yeah. So David, in the newsletter you had about establishing your uniform, you talked about base pieces. I guess for you, like an unstructured sport coat or a chore coat could be a base piece. And Michael, for you, like a base piece could be like that Oxford button down could be a base piece that you can add on to, thing that's consistent, and you can add on to it or take away from it to vary the look depending on your situation.
Yeah. I would say, you know, even if you want to go to Uniqlo and buy button-down shirts and khakis from Uniqlo and socks and underwear and whatever else, and then you maybe spend a little bit more money, you know, to David's point, like buying a shirt jacket or buying a nice sweater or buying a nice pair of shoes or an accessory, a bag, you know, those things are where I think you can sort of step up. And then, you know, I think then your uniform becomes like the base is like a couple types of pair of pants that you like. And then you mix them with like a couple shirt jackets, a sport coat, a sweater, all these things. And that's how you sort of like build the variety of your uniform. That's my take on it.
I have to say, like when I was a young guy and moved to New York, like I was living in men's stores, even though I couldn't afford those clothes. Like and I think there's something to be said for that. And now we've got the, you know, Instagram in our pocket, but I like to go to Barney's and I like to go to Bergdorf Goodman, and I would talk to the guys who work there. And they understood what my stage in life, and they didn't put pressure on me. And at a good store, they won't put pressure on you. And if you go into Ralph Lauren and look at the way they have the kind of mannequins rigged up, or what's in the windows, it gives you a sense of kind of how they view things, and you can see what you like from that. You can see how much it costs. You can see what you think makes sense for you or what doesn't make sense. But it's good to do those things. I mean, I go on the Sid Mashburn website, even at this stage in my life, and look at how they have a clever way that they show each kind of sport coat. If you scroll over it, it's got a shirt and tie. And then if you scroll over it again, it's like with no tie. So you can kind of see it worn two different ways. And I still get ideas about that, or see what I like and ask myself, well, why do I like that so much? Or why that's interesting. And I'd never thought about doing something that way. And I think that's a good thing, that you can still learn and see and even surprise yourself. I mean, like you probably look better in a light pink shirt than you think. I mean, a lot of guys do. And I didn't wear pink for a long time, and then I did. And then I was sort of changed my life. Or I didn't wear brown, and now I wear brown almost exclusively. Like you do want to give yourself room to evolve. And I think that's what we're talking about. It isn't like once you set your uniform, you can never change. Of course, these things can rotate, or you can wear something and just make a little change. I think when I was talking about, like, if you have a corduroy suit, or cords are good, like that's a good fabric. And I recommend like finding cords that you like, and maybe a corduroy sport coat that you like. And then it's not something you have to be delicate with, or depending on where you live, like a Harris tweed coat. Like these are things that are great, and you can get cheap ones on eBay and really kind of live in it for a while and get it dirty, throw it in the laundry. I do all sorts of stuff. I've put seersucker coats that seemed too kind of precious. I just threw it in the laundry, and then they were twice as wrinkly, and then I felt better about it, oddly.
So you mentioned the getting inspiration, like going into men's stores. Like for me, early on, like, late 20s, early 30s, I would go to blogs. I would go to Continuous Lean. I take Ivy, dye workwear, dye. I mean, and that's where I would get my style inspiration. I feel like has it all moved to Instagram now? Where's your guys? Like, where do you recommend guys going to get solid inspiration? Because I feel like a lot of the magazines, they're not like the style advice, or it's not very good. It's just like, here are the 20 boots you need this winter. And it's like, this is not useful for me because it's too much.
It's kind of all over. There are still sites like Dye Workwear that are interesting. There are still sites out there that have a much more edited point of view, which I think is more helpful if you identify with that. And then it's like a mix of Instagram and all these other things that will help serve as an inspiration point. I think it's the mainstream fashion media is a little bit different now than it was, and it's driven by different things. And part of that's like commerce, and part of it's much more fashion with a capital F than maybe it used to be. It used to be much more about like service and educating guys and sort of classic style. And now it's much more fashion driven. So I think, but you need to find the people that you can identify with. And if that's like Matt Hranick and William Brown Project or whatever it is, and then you sort of figure out, all right, these are the people that I feel like I want to model my personal style after. You can sort of go from there.
I think that's a really good point that Michael makes. And I also think the danger of Instagram, like I really loved the original photos. When I say original, like 15 or 20 years ago, photos from Pitti Uomo, where it was actual Italian men and what they were wearing, or Japanese buyers and what they were wearing. Now with social media kind of accelerated to such a speed, those things feel often very mannered, very theatrical, very self-aware, and very ridiculous to me. So I think you have to be careful. Like, you don't want to dress like you were expecting to be photographed. Like that's craziness. That's not a way to live in the world unless you're really, Nick Wooster, and there's only one Nick Wooster. So you can look at these places, but it's sort of like, you look at them and then you pour a little milk on it to like mellow out the coffee, right? Because it's just some of these things are very intense, and these guys are getting clothes and experiencing them in a way that isn't really, it's like they're living in a photo shoot. And if you're in a photo shoot, some things make sense. And then when you're out in the world, they make a lot less sense, and I think I think one of the things we're talking about is like, where you're comfortable and what your life requires. Like, are you going to meetings? Are you physically active the way your dad was, Brett, if he's, going out as working in the Forest Service or whatever it is that people need to use? Or are they going to be walking in mud? Are they going to be in a boardroom? Are they going to be reassuring investors? And then they're going to be doing things very differently. And that's, if people say things don't matter, the clothes don't matter, just think about the people that you want working for you and how you would want your lawyer or accountant to dress. If you're getting your taxes done, do you want the guy to be wearing a Metallica shirt? I'm not sure.
I think it's like if you have good personal style, it's a bonus for you. I think it's not about losing points, or, it's about, you have an opportunity to present yourself as unique or special or different or whatever that is. That to me is like the big win with having good personal style. It's not about like conformity and fitting in and making sure you're dressed appropriately for your role.
When you guys find a piece of clothing that you think is going to be a part of your uniform for a while, do you buy multiples of it?
Of course.
Okay.
That's like a huge deal. Like or if something seems like it's going to be shut down, or if you just know something's great, like when they were still making Brooks Brothers Oxford cloth button-down shirts in America, and you knew that, and maybe that was a delicate balance there. I got a stack of them. It has to do with where you are in your life and what your priorities are and your budget. But if you find a bottle of wine you like, man, get some. And if you're traveling and you see espadrilles, or if you even Masters hats, get on that.
I like the wine reference. That's pretty interesting. You'll be happy if you buy a few cases of some wine that you love. You'll be happy in 5 years that you did it. For me, like buying things in my uniform all depends on with the brand and what it is and what it costs. But I know that, like brands like Patagonia, if you love something from Patagonia, they phase out things all the time. So if there's a jacket you love and you wear it all the time, it's worth buying a few because they probably won't carry it through. The other time I'm buying like multiples is, I wear these canvas sneakers from Muji, and their website, they rarely have them in stock. And the stores it's always like sporadic if I can find them. So when I do find them, I buy 5 pairs at the same time, and they're not expensive. But I'm like, I don't want to risk, I don't trust them enough almost to be able to always have them, So, and like I used to buy this sweater every year from this store in Alabama that I love called Harrison Limited. And they would sell this like super soft lambswool Shetland sweater. And I would buy every fall, I would buy one. It was like my annual thing. And I would sort of call the shop and be like, what colors do you have? And then I'd say, all right, send me the green one. And they'd mail it to me. And then they stopped carrying the sweater. And I'm like, all right, now I need to figure out like who made the sweater, where else can I find it? And, I would have been better off just buying a few at, not just dragging it out.
Yeah, I had there's a pair of runners or sneakers that I got. They're like a replica of some vintage French Army sneaker. And I love it. And they stopped making, whoever decided to make it stopped making it. And I need a new pair and I'm out of luck. And it was a good look.
I mean, that's like a classic situation where you think something like, for me, even like fishing gear, like certain waders that when I was younger, they seemed like too expensive. And then ever since then, the waders have been getting crazy. So now I'm like on a mad hunt to find these 20-year-old waders, which of course doesn't work, or wading boots. And if you see something you like, it's actually interesting because Michael was talking earlier about these companies that continue to have the same product. That's like a good barometer of the values of a place. If they do something well and that they're going to continue to have that, it's the same way if you go to some beloved restaurant and you can get this great dish, that they're going to keep doing that, and that's a sign of how they want you to interact with them, they want you to trust them, that they want you to come back, and that you can always get this Barber jacket, these Red Wing boots, these 501s. That tells you a lot about those places.
How do you know if your personal uniform should change? Is it something intentional or does it just kind of happen naturally? You just find I'm wearing this thing a lot this year. This is part of my uniform now. Is that how it happens?
Yeah, I think I think part of that is like recognizing the wins when they're happening and saying, I feel good wearing this. I should stop spending time thinking about, what I'm going to wear all the time and stick with the things I feel good about. I think you just start to sort of it's a very liberating sense in a way where you're like, I've arrived at this and I know I like it. I don't have to worry about, it's one less thing I need to worry about from now on. Right. And you start to just drop things away and then, repeat the things that work really well for you.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I notice that my clothes have shrunk. No, I know it's just like your body changes, right? It's not the clothes, obviously. And you make some change about what makes sense for what you're doing. I mean, if you have a kid or you're traveling and you're in a hot place and something works or something doesn't. I mean, some of what we're talking about is like where design and function converge. Right. And when something makes sense because you're carrying a camera in your pocket, so you need bigger pockets. I mean, that's literally how some of these things happen. A lot of the clothes we're talking about have existed for a long time. And that's why, a safari jacket or a chore jacket or something that the Army developed was to solve certain problems. And you might have those problems. You're carrying certain things and you need clothes that meet your purposes. And maybe your coloration changes. Like my beard is gray now. That's great. And that changes with things like what colors I should wear. I don't look the same as I used to. And you want to, and that's all right. You want to evolve that way. And I think it's natural that your clothes change as you get older and your kind of place in the world changes. And that's something to be embraced, I think.
So let's say some guy's listening to this and thinking, okay, I want to start developing my personal, refine it. Parting advice, like where's one thing they can start doing today to start making that happen for themselves?
Well, I think you got to think about what your comfort level and what you're trying to do. I mean, I always encourage guys to dress up a little bit. I just think it's nice to try harder than to try less hard. And if you try a little harder, then in the long run, all that will become easier. You set a higher bar for yourself. And so I think it's nice to dress up a little bit. I mean, I think it's, it doesn't mean you have to live with it forever. I think one of the things we're talking about is a little bit of experimentation, which is natural, and then finding a new level for yourself.
I think a big part of this is, what you could do today is be open-minded to looking better and to putting in a little bit more effort and dressing a little bit better and starting to do it and make it a ritual. And I think once you do, you'll appreciate that you have put in that effort. And I think that goes a long way in just being maybe a little bit more introspective about who you want to be and how you want to project yourself, I think would be a great place to start.
Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. Is there some place people can go to learn more about your respective work?
Well, yeah. I mean, my book, The Optimist, The Case for the Fly Fishing Life, which we discussed on a previous episode.
I've gotten a lot of good feedback about that.
That's sweet. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. Thank you. That's out now, still out, and the paperback is coming soon. And then my newsletter, The Contender, comes out every week. And then I have the podcast with Michael, Central Division, our conversation every week too, which you can get from either subscribing to The Contender or his newsletter, A Continuous Lean. Michael, I'll lead you right into it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, David. That was very, very well done. I wish I had a book to say that I had written, but all I have is a newsletter, and it's just acl.news is my newsletter.
Well, Michael Williams, David Coggins, thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brett.
My guests today were David Coggins and Michael Williams. Check out the respective newsletters. David's can be found at thecontender.substack.com and Michael's can be found at acl.news. If you subscribe to either of the newsletters, you can get access to their podcast, Central Division, where they talk about style, fly fishing, golf, you name it, they discuss it. And make sure to check out our show notes at awim.is/personal uniform, where we've linked to some of the brands and clothing pieces mentioned in the show, as well as that iconic picture of David and Michael at the Masters we discussed. Check it out, awim.is/personal uniform. Well, that wraps up another edition of the A1 podcast. Make sure to check out our website at artofmanliness.com, where you find our podcast archives, as well as thousands of articles written over the years about pretty much anything you think of. And if you'd like to enjoy ad-free episodes of the A1 podcast, you can do so on Stitcher Premium. Head over to stitcherpremium.com, sign up, use code manliness at checkout for a free month trial. Once you're signed up, download the Stitcher app on Android or iOS, and you can start enjoying ad-free episodes of the A1 podcast. And if you haven't done so already, I'd appreciate if you take 1 minute to give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps out a lot. And if you've done that already, thank you. Please consider sharing the show with a friend or family member who you think you get something out of it. As always, thank you for the continued support. Until next time, it's Brett McKay. Remind you all to listen to the A1 podcast, but put what you've heard into action.